doing a couple of deals, I really learned where I'm better, where I function better, and really getting face to face in touch with my goals, and always asking myself, is this serving my goals or is it moving me farther away from my goals? My goal was passive income and early retirement, and a lot of the things that I was doing were moving me farther away from that goal.
Welcome to the Threefold Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is the podcast where you'll not only learn how you can achieve massive success in multifamily real estate investing, but also how you can simultaneously pursue great relationships with your family and a better walk with God. You can achieve financial freedom through real estate investing without sacrificing the relationships that mean the most to you. Now, here's your host, Lee Yoder.
Welcome back, Threefold listeners. Hope you're having a great week. We've got a great podcast for you today with a great guest. Emma Powell is joining us today. She has been featured on Business Insider and the Bigger Pockets podcast, as well as many other programs and stages. Today, we're going to talk about real estate, a few other things, but she has a lot of experience with that. She's the owner-operator of High Rise Group, along with her husband of 25 years, who they've partnered on 500 units since relocating to Salt Lake City in 2018 after 20 years in Austin, Texas. They're either general partners or capital raisers or loan guarantors. They're parents of 6 homeschooled children, ages 24 to 10, and they have extensive property management and construction management experience. But Emma, was a lot there. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks. It's good to finally get to have a real life conversation with you. I think you've been really supportive of my Instagram channel, especially in the early days when there was nobody there.
Well, that's good. Good.
So that I kind of got to know you through Instagram and just your stuff. So
yeah. Oh, neat. That's good. Yeah. I try to, I'm not very good on all social media, but try to, when I am on there, trying to support others, trying to do the same thing and what you guys are doing. So, I think we're going to connect on many levels. We've just got 2 kids. We're weaker than you and your husband, but we homeschool and do all that. So, I think we. So, hey, Emma, take us all the way back though. You and your husband, what got you into real estate? Why, when, how, all that. Take us back to that point.
I think it was when we first moved to Utah is when I first started looking at it as a serious business. Before that, I'd always thought you should have a couple rental houses as a side hustle. My parents always sold their houses on lease options when I was growing up. And so I didn't really understand how it worked back then, but I started learning about it after we moved to Utah. Basically what happened is he got laid off in Austin. And we had a couple of cities that we were willing to move to. So we looked for jobs in Austin. I think Phoenix, Denver, and Salt Lake City were the ones where we were looking pretty hard. And he got a lot of job interviews in Salt Lake and 0 everywhere else. It was kind of surprising. Oh, wow. So he had a pretty quick job acceptance. And we had a
God was trying to tell you something there.
It kind of felt like it. Yeah. So we just pulled up stakes on our little ranch in Texas and packed up a truck and left. I mean, it was a whirlwind. And in Texas, I was a real estate photographer and a wedding photographer on the weekends. Okay. And when we got to Utah, I didn't want to restart that business. I was tired of giving away my weekends and having them booked so far out, even though I loved doing weddings and I felt like I was good at it. I just didn't want to restart that business. And the real estate photography industry in Salt Lake City at the time, and even kind of still now, if you look at our listings, it's a lot of homemade stuff. It's just really hasn't taken hold. And I talked to a couple of real estate photographers and they just were struggling to even keep themselves busy, much less partnering up with me on a project. And I said, do I really want to do this? Do I really hustle that hard? And gross $100,000 or it's just I just don't want to do it. So I started looking into small business consulting because I had graduated college just like the summer before. And I thought, hey, I finally have some credentials here to help people. I was working as a marketer for the Austin rugby team. And so I was helping wedding venue owners do their social media and helping them figure out bookkeeping types of things, just small business management that a lot of people just don't know how to do. They're really good at their technician part of their job, but they're really not very good at working on their business, building their business, and they even get lazy about essentials like bookkeeping or marketing. So I thought, I'll do that. But I ended up at real estate clubs and came across one where they were trying to sell me a an expensive program, and I'm friends with a bunch of those guys now, and they still give me a hard time. They're like, "Oh, here 4 or 5 years later, you still haven't signed up." Like, I know, I just so I still spend a lot of time with that group, but I looked them up before, of course, I'm going to join anything. I grew up with and in our time in Austin with a lot of scammers, Ponzi schemes, and bookkeeping cookers, and a lot of them went to prison, federal prison. I mean, it was just something that I didn't want to get involved in if I felt like there was anything untoward. So I was just doing my due diligence on this group, and I came across a thread on Bigger Pockets discussing this group, and I had never heard of Bigger Pockets before. So I start scrolling. Of course, I mean, you could scroll on there for years, and people were talking about, well, why would you join this program or that program when you could spend $150 and join your local RIA for a lot less and get a lot more? And I didn't know what that was, so I Googled, RIA, and found the website, and I found my local chapters, and I just started going. And it's, you sit there and you think to yourself, for $100 or $150, not all areas have a RIA, and not all RIAs are very good. But I got lucky because we had 3 of them in this area that are fantastic. And so I joined all 3 of them. I just started going to all the meetings, all the lunch meetings, all of the online stuff, just anything that I could go to, I went to, met a lot of people, and they just put so much content on the stage in front of you every single month or every single week. I was going to some RIA meeting at least once a week, sometimes twice, and just learning a ton. And I knew that I wanted to be in commercial. We were looking at small apartment buildings. When we sold our little ranch, we came up to Utah with some seed money. And so I said, here, let's put a down payment on a house here, and then the rest of it, I'm going to go start a real estate business. Because I mean, we made the money in real estate from house hacking and forced appreciation by live-in renovations and things like that. And so I said, well, let's just earmark this and go do a real estate business. And my husband was totally fine with it because he knows I'm entrepreneurial. He knows I didn't want to get a job or a full-time job. And he also, just in his head, he was like, I'm going to separate our personal finances from whatever this is you're doing over there. And he used to call it my monopoly money, because I could just go do whatever I wanted with it. And if I lost it all, he didn't care, because in his head, he had already mentally separated himself from that cash. And so he was able to just keep working the W-2, keep the lights on. And he used to bug me a lot at the beginning, like, get your books in order, make sure you're running your business well, because I don't want anything you do in your business to affect the personal. Let's keep a really bright line of division between these 2 activities. And that gave him a lot of security and comfort, knowing that no matter what I did, this little lifeboat would be over here, and safety. So I just jumped right into it and started researching commercial, and along the way bought a couple of smaller properties, some single families and some duplex from a wholesaler, and started running those. And while the whole time kept researching and looking into doing commercial, I knew from the wedding photography and the real estate photography that if you want to make money in an industry, you need to go after the commercial. And how I chose my specialties in photography was the same way. I basically looked it up on all of my photography boards and groups, and people would say, what's the highest margin or what's the highest grossing type of photography? And it was without a doubt commercial. But then people would say on the residential side or the consumer side, wedding photography. So I really went hard after those 2 things in my photography business, because if I'm going to spend time doing something, I have so many kids, I can't really justify spending a lot of time away from them unless the results are really worth the time I spend away from them. So with real estate, it was the same. I knew commercial was where it was at. And along the years of the last couple of years of doing this, I've also learned now that raising capital and fund management blows the ceiling off of what you can make with commercial real estate. And so I've been really focusing on how can I make the most amount of money in the least amount of time.
That's awesome, man. So many good things there, Emma. I appreciate you going through all that. I really like that you brought your husband up and talking about the balance there, because I think that's so important. And that's often how it goes, Emma. I think maybe you've met others too, where like, if one spouse has a job and has the steady income and has the health insurance, that can be a big piece too. The other spouse can often, and especially I just feel like in this economy, maybe more than ever, can kind of go and maybe try to start something. And if you have one comfortable job that can at least just pay the expenses, like, hey, we know we're good, and you can do a good job of saving up some money and harvesting some equity like you guys did when you sold, you can go and try to start something. Oh, the other thing I have to mention, the RIA. I love that you brought that up. That was I was very blessed as well here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have an awesome RIA. It's actually kind of joined with Columbus, and it's great. And I did the same thing. Emma, I always tell people I'm not against paying for coaching, and these big coaching programs are all over the place now. I don't have a problem with them, and I may have done one, but my RIA was so good. It's like, what? Why would I'm getting that here, like you said, for almost nothing compared to these, $20,000, coaching firms or whatever. So, yeah, I love that you brought that up. I'm so glad you had the same experience because I was really blessed by that too. Okay. So many good things there. You're in Utah, you're kind of getting it going. But as you mentioned, you knew that commercial's where it's at. And as you're dipping your toes in, you're not in commercial yet. So how did you progress from there? How did you get into commercial?
In Austin, one of our neighbors was a self-storage developer, and he had some nice climate controlled Class A stuff right around our house. And every time we drove by him, we'd be like, hey, there's so-and-so's storage. And we talked to him about it a lot, and he would tell us kind of how to do it. And he was always trying to get us into it, especially when we bought our ranch. He's like, hey, you're going to put some blocks out there. I can refer business over there. We're full. And I just was still so stuck in the you have to pay cash for everything mindset that we didn't really understand a lot of what he was saying about how you bring in investors and raise capital for these projects. But I look back at that as this massive wasted opportunity. But when you know somebody who's doing something like this, when the next time I came across that, I'm like, oh, self-storage. I was like, oh yeah, I remember. And he was okay, now I see what he was trying to say. So that really helped to bring things into focus for us and was our first exposure to just average Joes living around the corner from you doing large commercial deals. Even in Austin, we used to go shopping for self-storage units, just like on the MLS, really. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, but it was like, okay, well, this small one is worth this mom and pop type of stuff. So when we got to Utah and we really started getting a taste for what this could look like and putting all of that into a new focus, a new understanding. I asked my husband, I said, well, who owns all those little apartment complexes around the campus? Because his parents are university instructors. And so he grew up with all his neighbors owning like a 12 unit or a 50 unit or something for these housing near campus. And he was like, oh yeah, my neighbor here, that farmer there owns this building. And I thought, well, I mean, just average people owning these things. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they saved up enough money, but they weren't billionaire famous people, and there were a bunch of them in his town that owned this kind of stuff. And I said, and you always have to have that attack mode. Like, if that person can do it, I can do it. Because at the end of the day, we're all fairly average humans. And I know people who are not as smart, who are not as resourceful, who are not as hard workers. And you look at that and they're doing it. And so you just have to figure out how. So instead of going around and telling them, I'll take you out to lunch if I can pick your brain, which is the worst thing you can ever say to somebody. You're offering them zero value. Like a $5 cup of coffee or a sandwich is not worth an hour of your time. It's just not. No. And so I didn't want to go out there and tell them, okay, you're going to pick your brain. So I just started interviewing people at the RIA. So that's the same thing I did. I just went out and I thought, I'm going to have a bigger deal. By then I was running out of money on the small stuff anyway. And so my husband said, can you do a deal without your own money? Yeah. And
that's what everybody gets to that point at some point.
Yeah. And he challenged me to that. And plus commercial loans, you don't have to put them in your name. People say, oh, well, what do you do when you run out of loans? I'm like, go commercial. It's just, they're like, oh, trying to seller financing and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, go commercial. I even get commercial loans on my residential properties. The interest rate's a little bit higher, but it protects us from having to get more mortgages. Okay. So the loan situation is easier. You're not limited by any kinds of regulations or laws. They don't look at your personal finances to do it. It's more based against the asset itself. So commercial lending, I'm not going to say it's easier to do, but it's certainly easier on the requirements, especially if it's a non-recourse loan. If you have a smaller commercial property, 5 units or small warehouse or something like that, usually they're still going to make you put a personal guarantee on that loan, and they are going to underwrite your entire portfolio. So I had a commercial building. I wanted a 5-plex, And the lender told me, so this is the best property in your portfolio, and we can't lend to you for it because the rest of your stuff is the DSCR, or debt service coverage, is too low.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, what does that have to do with the property I'm buying? Yeah. And because I had to put a personal guarantee on it, they looked at my entire portfolio and turned me down for that loan. And that was when I took a step back. He said, well, you can bring in a co-signer or guarantor to sign on it with you. And I said, well, if I'm gonna have to bring a guarantor, I'm going lots bigger than a 5-unit. So I let that deal go and fortunately didn't lose any money on it. And then just started thinking, I got to go bigger. I got to get non-recourse loans where they're not looking at my entire portfolio when they're underwriting, which, first of all, that's a mess. That's just as bad as getting a mortgage when they're asking.
We've done that a couple times. It's a lot. Yeah. A lot of work.
They're awful. And we send them a bank statement, and then they'd see something else that's like opening up a whole can of worms. They're like, oh, well, now we need statements for that. I'm like, that wasn't even supposed to be in the file, but they saw it on some document they asked for. And that's exactly what it was like getting this 5-unit commercial loan underwritten. It felt like I was getting another mortgage. And in a way it was to my LLC, but it was a personal guarantee. How's that any different than doing it in my personal name?
Right.
In
a lot of ways it's not.
Exactly. So I just said, I got to go bigger. So I started hanging out with people who were doing it. And the way I got my first deal was total luck. It's total luck. However, I want to say that the reason that I've got lucky is because I was hanging out with the right people. So deals kind of shake out of the tree when you have the right network. And so on the one hand, you could say, oh, she was really lucky. But on the other hand, you can say she was hanging out with the right people, asking the right questions, doing the right things, and keeping my ear to the ground for those opportunities. So that was basically, I saw it on Facebook. Somebody she said, I'm selling my 50-unit in this small town in Idaho, which was where my husband grew up and where all those apartment complexes were of his neighbors.
Wow.
And I was like, I'll look at it. I didn't even know what I was doing. But I started calling people like that guy I took out for coffee, or other people I had met at other meetups and multifamily specific types of meetups. And I said, hey, I have this deal. From my uneducated eye, I think it might be good. And I had a couple people look at it, and through that, just sharing and talking to people, I was able to put together a partnership, and I had them sign non-disclosure, non-compete agreements. Do not feel shy about that. It's like a 1 or 2 page document, a couple $100 from your attorney, or like a DIY online, something. Start the relationship off the way that it needs to be, which is a professional, everything in writing, business relationship. So found some people from there and was able to get that one closed. But that wasn't the first commercial deal that I looked at. There was a 14-unit in my husband's hometown on the main street right by the college, that even looking back at it, it was a good deal. I should have bought it. I just couldn't figure out how to get the loan. I couldn't get enough money together. I didn't know how to. So the attempt to raise money for that project was something that put a little bravery notch on my belt, because when you attempt to do something and you fail, all you can do is walk away from that and say, I learned from that. Now, on these early failures, I didn't want to lose any money. But on some later failures, I've had some other failures since then where I lost a lot of money. But as one of my investors, who we were, one of my partners, when we were kind of, just going over the autopsy of what happened with the deal where we lost a bunch of money. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. I've spent more than that for a class, and I learned a lot less. Yeah. So, if you come away from failures, whether you lost money or not, the advantage there is that you're a lot farther ahead for the next time at bat. And you're going to have a sports analogy. How many times do you hit the ball on your first time at bat? Like maybe 0, unless you're super gifted. But you have to keep going up there and swing and swing and swing and swing and swing. And so that's what we were doing. We were looking at other commercial properties. I was cold calling on storage units, because I had my friend from Austin, also a couple of guys in Salt Lake that I'd met, that they're like, hey, we'd be interested in partnering on a storage unit. So I was doing all sorts of stuff to try and break into commercial.
You brought up so many good points again about the RIA, and I totally agree with what you said, where you did not get lucky. I mean, if you did, it's only because you were standing there. I mean, it made me think of, like you said, it just fell out of the tree. Well, it's because you were standing under the tree that you were able to catch it. Other people weren't under the tree. So it's because
I was shaking the tree.
And you were the one shaking the tree. Exactly. Right. And so, sure, you got lucky, but you were shaking the tree. You were standing there. You made a lot to make your own luck, I would say, at least. But getting part of the RIA, like you said, just seeing other people doing it and realizing these are all normal people, they're doing it. You start making connections. And then I think partnering is so powerful. On my first multifamily was only a 16 unit, but the guy running the apartment focus group for the RIA, I brought him in on it just because I was like, man, you've been such a good mentor to me. I'd like you to continue. Can I give you 10% of the deal? Can you come in? Yes. I mean, that, made it worth his time. And then property management, I always think they're like a great partner. I bring in a property management company, they're going to manage it. It's easy for them. Like, it just gave me so much more confidence.
Doing a couple of deals, I really learned where I'm better, where I function better, and really getting face to face in touch with my goals, and always asking myself, is this serving my goals, or is it moving me farther away from my goals? My goal was passive income and early retirement. And a lot of the things that I was doing were moving me farther away from that goal. Even though financially it was moving me closer to the early retirement, time-wise, it was moving me farther away. So just keep revisiting and keep asking yourself, is this playing to my strengths, or is this cleaning up after my weaknesses?
Oh, I think it's so important to keep revisiting that and just make sure, because, okay, what are my goals? I mean, number one, families and couples, I feel like they don't get clear on their goals good enough. But then once you do, if you can do that important step, to keep coming back to that, is this getting me closer? Because you can do a lot of things that make you money. Again, you can go flip houses and make money at it. I'm in real estate. I'm making money.
I could have been a photographer.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. But, yeah, if your goal is financial freedom, if your goal is to build up passive income, none of that's it's not passive income. It's never going to be. So yeah, it's so important to look at that. And then, you mentioned just talking there a little bit about what you're not good at and focus on your strengths. That's one thing I love about commercial and bigger deals. You can partner, so you can go find people. It's a bigger pie that you can split up, so you can build a team and have people that have different strengths, different passions, and everybody gets to do what they're good at, what they enjoy doing, and things like that.
After a syndication meeting, I think I was speaking on a panel at our RIA, and afterwards somebody came up to me and he asked me, he says, if you have to take such a small piece of the pie, why aren't you just flipping single family homes when your profitability would be about the same? And I said, at this point of the active income, it would probably be pretty similar to me just flipping houses. And he says, well, why don't you just do that and not have any partners? I said, because I don't like doing it. I like commercial, multifamily, real estate. That's why I do it. And I'm able to partner with people who can do the parts that I don't like doing. Now, that's no excuse for not knowing how, especially not knowing how to read the reports that they give you. You still you're never going to get away from that, right? Like, some people hate capital raising, but it doesn't matter. If you're on a commercial deal, everybody's raising capital. So you still have to know how to do it. And you still have to be able to participate and read it, but I don't have to do it full time. That's not my main job. And it comes down to him. I said, how do you want to spend your time? And he said, well, I'd rather flip houses and not have any partners. And I was like, well, good luck scaling that, because what happens at the end of that is now he has a pile of money, and what does he do with it? Do you have to keep flipping houses? And me, I have a pile of cash from acquisition fees and cash flow distributions and things like that. But at the end of the day, I have a massive property that I can sell, and I get a bigger chunk of actual cash for the same amount of time and effort that somebody else spends doing something else. So yes, it's how you want to spend your time. And then I just take what I would be earning doing something by myself without partners, and I just give it a little bit of a boost. Every deal I do, I can make a little bit more than I could have made doing something by myself. So to me, it's like, spend your time on something that you like. If I didn't like real estate, I would probably be like a crypto investor or something. I mean, I invest in what you like and what you know. And for me, it just really wasn't worth it spending my time doing things that I had to force myself to do. The other thing about partnerships is they give you accountability. When you show up to your weekly meeting and you haven't done it, that's a massive problem. And so for me, it's like having a personal trainer at the gym. You show up and you paid for it, and he's there, and you're being a whiner. What good is that doing you? But your partnerships really can force accountability into something where, I know a lot of single family or solopreneurs who just get burned out and then they kind of fizzle out.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I know when I have a partner and I was telling my wife, one reason I want a partner is just because I want a partner. I don't want to do this on my own anymore. Like, it's boring. I've got nobody to celebrate with. I've got nobody to talk to. Nobody, hold me accountable. So I totally agree with that. Wait, you mentioned passive income, and that's what I'm passionate about. That's what we're passionate about here at Threefold. I know you're building an investing club. And I'm guessing, you're preaching, teaching passive income. I know it's what you're going after. Can you get into that a little bit, Emma? Tell us a little bit about your investing club. What's the passion behind that? And just kind of tie in passive income and your thoughts behind that and why that's so important, why you're going after it so hard.
Um, well, I knew when I very first started this that I did not have enough cash to invest to support our family just on the passive investment. I was giving myself roughly a 10% rate of return because some deals you're going to do 20 or 30 and other deals you're going to lose money. And so I figured if I could just average somewhere around 10%, then make $10,000 a month, 120K a year, that's $1 million. And so I didn't have $1 million. And so I had to think to myself, how am I going to make $1 million in cash and have this invested? So return on equity became a really important concept to me, where you're having to reevaluate your portfolio and say, should I refinance this? Should I sell it? If I refinance it and pull cash out of it, is it going to continue to cash flow as a good, strong rental? And if it's not going to, then you've got to sell it, because you have to take that equity and keep it moving. Like the velocity of your equity is really important. So I spent a lot of time learning about what that looked like and what that meant. And in my syndications or my large commercial deals, I was always looking for limited partners and I was doing smaller stuff with joint ventures, because on a joint venture, on a small deal, like you said, a 16 unit or an 18 unit, you can have people in there who only have like 200 or 300 grand if they're willing to put it all in one deal, and you can get something done. Like this person's putting in 200, I'm going to put in 50, that person's going to put in 100, we're going to go buy a 16 unit building. So that would be a joint venture, no limited partners, you're all working together.
Right.
And so I was doing joint ventures, and I was doing a pretty good job of raising capital for that. But I realized if I wanted to go bigger, then I had to have guys who were willing to put a $500,000 or $1 million into one deal. And I just didn't have a lot of people like that in my network. And so rather than putting pause until I met people like that, I never want to say like, I don't have them in my network, so I couldn't do it. It was more like, I don't have them in my network right now. How do I go find them? And in the meantime, while I'm building that, what am I going to do to keep building my business and keep purchasing properties in the meantime? So in the meantime, the answer to that is syndication. You go out and you build a limited partner network of people who can put in 50 grand to a deal, and you syndicate it. Well, syndication costs, $15, $20, maybe $30,000 for those legal documents. And so the deal has to be big enough to absorb those. You just underwrite it. And if it doesn't make sense, then it doesn't work. Right. So you're looking for not only a good deal, but a deal that can support those costs. So that's kind of pushed me into going a little bit bigger than some of these joint ventures. And what I found was I didn't know any limited partners either. I knew a lot of other entrepreneurs and people who would reach out after a podcast interview like this and say, hey, I have 200 grand or I have 300 grand. I had just lost a deal because we couldn't raise enough capital to close it. And instead of bringing in more capital raisers, which is what we should have done, we were too committed to keeping the group really small. We should have just said, who cares? Whatever it takes to get this thing done, we're going to bring in 10 capital raisers and we'll figure something out to get them still working towards, this goal of being a legitimate role in a general partnership. So legally, people can't just join a GP just to raise capital. There has to be some other legitimate role there. So working with my attorney on what went wrong with that deal and how could we have brought legally more capital raisers in. And I was complaining to him, I was like, all my network are entrepreneurs. They don't want to be limited partners. They want a co-GP, but they don't have enough money to do these huge deals. I said, I don't know how to make use of the millions of dollars in my network that are useless to me, because you can't have 40 joint venture partners. It's illegal. And he said, well, why don't you just start an investment club? I was like, why would I start something I don't even know what it is? Like, what is this? So he sent me home with some homework, and then he went and conferred with one of his partners, and we had a conference where we just went over all the rules and legalities of how to raise capital from a club, meaning active investors versus limited partners. And I was really intrigued by this idea, and I brought it to my meetup. I was hosting a monthly meetup at the time, and I just said, what do you guys think of this idea? And most of the people were like, let's do it. We're going in, we're pooling our money. And in order to protect that pool, we are then able to legally negotiate a place into the GP, because we're bringing them in a pool and we don't want to be limited partners. We need to sit in on the meetings. We need to have access to the financials. We just need to be in the back office to protect that investment. But then, because we are then a part of the GP for a legitimate reason, because we have experience and we're able to say, hey, I can check over bookkeeping, I can help out with this. So we were then able to say, well, we can raise more capital from limited partners, because GPs, like I said, everybody's raising capital. It doesn't matter what your role is, everybody's raising capital. So we're then able to go out to our very much smaller LP networks because I can't raise $1 million from limited partners, but I can raise $1 million in my pool. And then those partners can then go out, and some of them choose to raise more capital and some of them choose not to. But it's a great experience to figure out how to do it and learn how to do it. And then we'll go out and raise maybe another couple $100,000. And because this main sponsor already has a fund that they've built, either 506B or C fund, we have an SEC approved vehicle to put limited partners into. So we don't have to start our own fund or sponsor our own property. We just put them straight into their investing portal. And so we can bring in a little bit here and there, a little extra, help out. And it's been a wonderful educational opportunity and a networking opportunity for the club members. Yeah. So we use a platform called TribeVest.
Yes.
And they manage all of that corporate governance for us.
I love that.
So it's got people like me in it who are just looking for a little less asset management, but not completely zero. We also have a couple of fund managers in there who are bringing us deals that are open for investment that we never would have heard about otherwise. Or they're also looking to increase their deal flow because they might have a blind pool that they put together and they got to place this capital somewhere. So it makes sense for them to come into our group and analyze more deals with us. So it goes from completely beginner all the way up to extremely experienced, because the structure of how we're doing it is very flexible. And so each person can set unique goals and make the club into something that will work for their unique goals. Mine are different than people's, but it's still working inside the same group.
You've mentioned a couple of times, and this is really important to me too, that, hey, I don't want the ball and chain. I don't want more active. And I want to be passive. I know you're homeschooling 6 kids while you're building your real estate empire. I'm sure that takes some serious intentionality and creativity. So what are some of your tricks? What are some of your life hacks? How are you keeping all this together? You're not, I know you're not where you want to be yet. You don't have that complete time freedom. So as you're getting there, how are you making all this work? And you're laughing, so I'm sure there's times it's not working.
Well, the reason I'm laughing is because you hear my phone ringing there, and then that thumping noise, and then a knocking sound.
Well, I didn't hear the knocking.
That's my daughter. She does a class every day at the local high school, and it's just for an hour, and she needs somebody to drive her there. And I'm like, not me today. Go ask somebody. And I'm being recorded, so it's not like, hey, just a second, I need to text my daughter. So, I probably could have. I'll tell you a little funny story. When I was doing the Bigger Pockets interview, Brandon Turner, he asked me a question, and I'm in the middle of my storytelling monologue, which is like my favorite thing to do. And I was losing my place because you could see his eye contact was wavering and his head started to turn. And I started looking at what he was looking at. It's just human nature, right? And finally, I completely lost my train of thought. And he looks back, he goes, hold on just a second, guys. And he looks over, and you see the top of this tiny little head, and he's talking to this little toddler, and he's like, okay, blah, 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 and sends her off on her merry way. And he comes like, I'm sorry. But it was really good for me as we're sitting there talking about how to be an investor with 6 homeschooled kids, to have the host of the show be like, just a second, I got a 3-year-old. I've
got kids too. Right.
When they were younger, especially before COVID, because now that you have COVID, it seems like nobody really cares that your kids are walking through the background or bothering you in the middle of a call.
Yeah.
But when they were homeschooled before COVID was a thing, I had to do a lot of training, like some sign language. So my little one would open the door, and she would give me like the hungry sign, or so I'd have like the 1 minute or 2 minutes, and I would show her on the clock. But these all had conversations that took place beforehand, so that I could say, okay, when mommy's on the phone and you walk in, I can't have you whining or crying or talking on the phone because mommy's trying to pretend she's in an office and there are no kids here. And so we had little preset signals that we would do, which I guess brings me to my next point of how we make this work. I don't homeschool like a normal homeschooler. So the way that I homeschool is all life learning based. We don't do any written work until probably high school, when they start expressing a need and a desire to do this. And so it takes a huge part of the burden off of me of feeling like I have to do this extra stuff to educate them, because think of it more like spring break or summer vacation. You're educating your kids by you're sitting at the beach talking about the physics of wave mechanics as they roll into the shore. You're digging up little crabs and talking about biology. You're collecting shells. Everywhere you go is a learning opportunity, and you naturally do it as a loving and literate parent. And I realized this is all I have to do. I don't have to do anything extra. I don't have to do workbooks. I don't have to do enrichment activities and force and attendance and keep track of all of this garbage. I know I can educate my children just by hanging out with them, reading and enjoying the things that I enjoy, the things that they enjoy. And now when people ask me how I homeschool them, I say, well, we have an entrepreneurial focus. So
Yeah.
I'm always pushing them to start little businesses and helping them with their business.
That's awesome.
And they learn a ton from it. So that frees up my time to be able to run a business. And it has the double dipping effect because when they're around while I'm running my business, they are being educated during.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I became a physical therapist. So I went to school for 20 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
From kindergarten to graduating PT school is 20 years straight. And I'm like, did I really need 20 years of school to become a PT? I don't think so.
No.
And then I quit being a PT, and my wife likes to remind me that, like, great job getting your doctorate and then quitting that and doing real estate. But I'm like, yeah, well, I wish I would have known I was an entrepreneur before I did all that, but I didn't. So no, it's great stuff, Emma. I love how, intertwining the family and business. And that's, that's been our experience with real estate and just entrepreneurship in general. It allows for more of that. It's one great thing is to have that flexibility. Like, even though you're busy and you're doing a lot and you're doing a podcast, you can, you make your own schedule, you make it work, you fit kids and kids can come in. And I love that. I love that it can kind of all be mixed together. It's really good stuff. But before I let you go, what would you say is the main ingredient for someone to be a successful real estate investor? Maybe they want to be active, maybe they want to be passive, but if you just give us one, what would you say that is?
Networking.
Okay. Yeah. That's one I say a lot.
Yeah, it is the number one. And the reason I say that instead of something like financial literacy is because my network has been what has improved my financial literacy and my ability to do financial analysis. And I'll just give you one quick example. I was at a conference on marketing and building your brand online. And at that conference, I saw someone working on a pretty complicated spreadsheet. And so I went to go sit next to him and I'm watching the spreadsheet, and finally we started chit-chatting and networking. My husband was on the other side of the room networking with somebody else. We often divide and conquer that way. Yeah. And it was like this real estate multifamily analysis tool that he was creating, and he was looking to start selling it and training people on it. And I looked at it and I said, dude, I ain't never using that thing. Like, people like me, there's no amount of training that would get me to use that thing. I said, can you pull the CEO version? And he was like, yeah, sure. So a couple of weeks later, he reaches out, he sends me his CEO version of this tool. And I started using it for all of my financial analysis. And then I ended up partnering up with him on a deal. He did the financial analysis. And now I hire him if I need something underwritten. That is what comes out of networking, is me learning, me having better access to tools, better access to people. And you can't do anything in real estate, no matter what it is, legal, financial, whatever, without a good networking skill set.
Absolutely. Well, and then let me ask you kind of to flip that question around a little bit. Key ingredient for while you're having success in real estate investing, maintaining your priorities, maintaining faith, family, those things that are important to you.
I just write down my goals. It's kind of like my version of vision board.
Yes.
I just write them all down. And I sticky tack them up to here. So every time I'm in here working in here, I can see them right in front of me. I also have some cards, to-do lists and things like that, but these stay up at the top and they just live there. So it helps me to stay focused. And when I ask myself, like, am I really getting closer to these goals, or is what I'm doing taking me farther away from these goals? A lot of it is like, I have a live abroad card with the countries that I want to spend more than a tourist visa in. And the 5 to 7 year asset management ball and chain was like, oh, it's taking me farther away from that goal. So I need to rethink this. The club is a much better fit because I can do it 100% online. And it's one of those things that if I want to bring in club officers to run the thing, if I really want to take a step back or even turn it over eventually, if I'm like, I'm good, it allows me to grow with it. And it's not a ball and chain. It's the opposite.
Is it through highrise.group that they find that's your investing club is in there?
Yeah. So the different pages, I have a contact me page, and it has all my social links. It has my phone number on there, my email address, if you want to call, has my mailing address. There's another one called, sign up or join in. And that is split between active investors and passive investors. And so there's a little bit of learning information there for each one of those. And it'll tell you how to get in the club. Or if you're a passive investor, if you just want to sign up for the list to be notified when we have deals looking for limited partners.
Okay, awesome. So we'll put that in the show notes, send everybody there. Thanks for all that. Before I let you go, though, I always like to ask my guests before they leave, how might my listeners and I be praying for you in the coming weeks?
Wow, that's a new one. I've never heard that before. I just got back from a mastermind where they had a section on like faith and family and building that part of your life.
Cool.
And so that I spent a lot of time thinking about that lately. We've been working on, because we're not actually very good at the philanthropy thing and volunteering and giving back to our community. I think like having so many kids for so many years, it was just all I could do to get out of bed.
That's your ministry right there. Yes.
Yeah. So we've been trying now that the kids are older. We realized our older kids have not had a good example of ministering or philanthropy because babies and little kids and they missed out on that. So now I'm trying to go back and retrain like, hey, we need to do more service. We need to be more giving. So I don't know. I think that would be really helpful as we're trying to find something that fits into our lifestyle and something that the kids can have their hearts softened and have this desire to serve, because sometimes it's like dragging them. And I think that is part of what makes it the most challenging.
We're there too. It's difficult with young kids. Sometimes it feels like this is my ministry right here. Like I'm doing all I can. I'm trying to raise 6 good humans. In your case, for us, just 2 seems like a lot. I'm right there with you though, that it is worth like pushing into that and pushing through the restraint and the kids not wanting to do it. Cause it's just a powerful experience. I mean, I think that's what the Bible tells us. And I think it's so true that, you gain a lot from it as well. Awesome, Emma. Thanks so much again for a great interview. We'll put your stuff in the show notes, send people your way, and good luck continuing with the investment club and working toward your goal of financial freedom.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really enjoyed your unique take on these topics. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us for another great episode. I hope you'll take action on what you've learned today. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving Lee a 5-star rating and review. And check him out on threefoldrei.com. Until next time, 1 Timothy 6:17.